Egypt mourns the dozens killed in some of the deadliest football riots in its history. Wednesday's fatal stampede adds to protesters' anger at the ruling military council. Defiant commemorations of a massacre in Hama 30 years on. As the current Syrian crisis continues, Russian objections remain a hurdle at UN Security Council negotiations. And it is all going according to plan, insists NATO's chief, as the US appears to be moving up the date for the withdrawal of combat troops from Afghanistan. Thanks for joining us here at France 24. I'm Georgia Calvin-Smith. First, Egypt's begun 3 days of mourning for the 74 people killed Wednesday in deadly football violence. The league game between Al Masry and Al Ahly sparked some of the worst rioting in the sport's history. Soccer fans invaded the pitch in Port Said, causing a stampede in which dozens were crushed to death. In an emergency parliamentary session Thursday, the Prime Minister announced the dissolution of the country's Football Federation's board and the resignation of the Port Said governor and police chief.
Clothes, shoes and bloody bandages. Debris from the clash between rival football fans litters the Port Said stadium. Dozens were crushed to death, whilst others were fatally stabbed. The violence erupted when supporters of the local side stormed the field, following a rare victory against Cairo's Al Ahly team.
The gates between the two groups of supporters were either forced open or taken off entirely, and the Al Masry fans flooded the Al Ahly side. And that's how the violence started.
Both the governor and the police chief of Port Said resigned within hours, as the police has been accused of failing to provide sufficient security at a match between teams that have had a fierce rivalry for over 60 years.
This match is passing in a big crisis between Masry and Ahly this 60 years ago. This trouble, it's happened every match here when the Masry meet Ahly here in Port Said, because the spectators each other shouting all the time.
As families bury their dead, crowds gathered outside the stadium, shouting, "Tell us the truth, tell us the truth." Many are blaming the military rulers, accusing them of staging the violence to show that emergency regulations giving security forces wide-ranging powers must be maintained.
The streets have run red in the Syrian city of Hama on Thursday. Pro-democracy activists there are on strike and have painted roads crimson, marking the 30 years since the massacre of tens of thousands of residents by forces loyal to the current president's father. Today, around 6,000 people are thought to have been killed in President Bashar al-Assad's current crackdown. The violence continues, but so do the protests. Meanwhile, an Arab Western push for the UN Security Council to stem the bloodshed continues to be hampered by Russian objections.
2 days of talks at the UN and still no resolution on Syria. Despite this, French Foreign Minister Alain Juppé tried to put a positive spin on the push to adopt an Arab League plan.
There was a consensus at the Security Council when talking about the resolution presented by Morocco that backs the Arab League agreement. We will wait to see if they move us closer to resolution, either by the end of this week or next week.
This new resolution could involve considerable concessions from its authors to get the green light from Security Council members Russia and China. A major sticking point in the current plan is the call for Syrian President Bashar al-Assad to hand over power. US Secretary of State Hillary Clinton was committed to pushing the resolution through, albeit in a modified form.
With respect to Syria and the attitude of Russia, we recognize that getting the Security Council to act will require continuing consultations with our partners in the Council, including Russia and China, on what the wording of a resolution will be.
The rewording of the resolution will be crucial if they want to sidestep yet another veto from Russia. Moscow's thus far been resistant to regime change in Syria and has warned against any foreign military intervention.
If the text is unacceptable for us, we will vote against it, of course. If it's a text that we consider erroneous, that will lead to a worsening of the crisis, we will not allow it to be passed. That is unequivocal.
These talks come as violence in Syria enters its 11th month. The UN estimates over 5,000 people have been killed in the uprising.
NATO's Secretary General said that allies are sticking to the original plan to wind down military operations in Afghanistan by the end of 2014. The US has said it intends to end combat operations there by the end of next year. Anders Fogh Rasmussen's responded by insisting that it had always been the strategy that the last areas be handed over to Afghan security forces by mid-2013 before NATO troops gradually changed their role from combat to support in the following months. There are fears that after over a decade of conflict in Afghanistan, a hasty pullout by Western troops could hand a victory of sorts to the Taliban.
It's been over a decade since the Taliban were driven out of Kabul. But as the spectre of civil war looms large on the horizon, these locals say their return to power is inevitable.
The Taliban are our brothers. They had to leave their country and now they should come back. They must reclaim their land. They should be working for their country like we are. We must rebuild our country together.
Raging poverty, corruption and unemployment. Many here say standards of living have plummeted since the Taliban left. For them, the Mullah Omar embodies their hopes for the future.
We've got university degrees. For example, I've got a degree, and when I look for a job, I can't get one. If the Taliban agree to a peace plan with our government, if everyone works hand in hand, we will finally be able to resolve all of our problems.
Yet the place of women in Afghan society is still a bone of contention.
I pray the Taliban never come back.
Well, they're coming back tomorrow.
Under the Taliban, women didn't have access to education, and their activities outside the house were extremely limited. Some say they're prepared to have them back if it brings peace, but with certain conditions.
If the Taliban come back, they mustn't curtail our rights. They have to let us work. We need to work, especially those of us who've lost our husbands.
Some doubt whether the Taliban will be able to agree with the authorities on key issues. Just a few weeks ago, they threw out the Afghan constitution, a document which recognizes the rights of both men and women.
Now, here in France, one of the policy issues cropping up ahead of upcoming elections is that of poverty. It's a topic that generates strong feelings. At a demonstration over the issue at the Élysée Palace, one protester threw flour at François Hollande on Wednesday. The Abbé Pierre Foundation was presenting the Socialist Party's presidential challenger with a social contract demanding that France's politicians do more to address the problems faced by those struggling to make ends meet.
It's 2 p.m. and Agnès arrives at her regular workshop.
The idea of the workshop is to save as much as you can and buy as little as possible.
This is a twice-monthly meeting organised by the small town's social welfare team. Women in difficult situations come here to feel less isolated.
Being busy again. I'd arrived at a point where I couldn't do anything. To get up in the morning, you have to have a reason to get up. You have to have something to do.
Everyone here has had a tough past, all of them affected by a life-changing event. For Agnès, a divorce and health problems accelerated her fall into difficulties. Today, she finds support from within her local community. In Bruges, on the outskirts of Bordeaux, food aid charity Les Restos du Cœur works like a regular small business. Volunteers must stock up the centres before food can be distributed. The NGO's just launched its 40th food centre in the Gironde area. Each year, there's a similar theme.
4 years ago, we used to handle 70 tonnes a week. That went up to 85 tonnes last year.
Throughout France, Restos du Cœur faces increasing demand for its help. In 3 years, the number of people coming to them for assistance has gone up 25%. 109 million meals were distributed in their last food drive. For the past 4 years, Agnès has been coming to a Restos du Cœur centre. Her first trip here wasn't easy, but it was inevitable, with 2 children to feed at home.
To get in the door isn't easy. You have to swallow your pride. And then, bit by bit, I realise there's no shame in coming here. They're here to help, not make your life harder.
It's in rural areas that Restos du Cœur's seen the greatest rise in demand. The Medoc, in the middle of this prestigious wine region, is regarded as a poverty zone.
Well, we will be looking at the issue in more depth on our Reporters programme here on France 24 later, so try and catch that if you can. But for more on the issue now, I'm joined by Pierre-Yves Madinier. He's president of the organisation Fourth World France. Now, Pierre-Yves, thanks very much for coming in. Now, France being, a stable Western country, do you think that that contributes to it being more problematic in terms of raising awareness of just how widespread poverty is?
I think there is a sort of paradox because France is a fairly rich country, but it remains a very strong poverty, and there is a real anguish among French citizens to fall into poverty. So poverty is a major issue for the French society.
And is there any kind of early markers that you've come across in your research that suggest that certain groups are more vulnerable than others to end up in poverty or struggling?
We have a major problem mainly for school. We are very proud of our school system, but 150,000 pupils per year leave the system, scholar system, without any qualification. So there is a real need to concentrate on the poorest people, because if the poorest can succeed, everybody in the French society can succeed. And it will be very good for the moral and for the general activity.
Now, earlier on the topic, I was mentioning how demonstrations have been held around the Élysée, the hopes that the upcoming elections will shed more light onto the issue. But how is it something that can be tackled politically? What are you hoping to see out of either Sarkozy or Hollande?
We hope it will be a real political priority to unite everybody around this issue. 80% of the people are concerned by poverty, aware or another, and to give the goal of destroying extreme poverty during the coming years to the presidential election.
Now, poverty obviously takes on a number of different forms. In terms of housing inequality, I understand that 9 out of 10 people in the latest report that was by Abbé Pierre, the Abbé Pierre Foundation, suggested that 9 out of 10 people living around Paris say that they have problems with housing. Is that something that is also central to your concerns, or is that just a case of it being difficult to find an apartment in Paris?
It's a central problem. A family expressed the strong idea, if you have no housing, you have no opportunity to live with your children. And a lot of people are impatient to live with their children due to housing problems. So it's a major problem. Without housing, you can do not anything. First, housing. Second, employment. School for the children.
But when you say housing problems, what exactly is the form that we're talking about here?
It's very narrow housing, or people who live in campings the year long, or who live in the streets. There is a real problem because of a lack of low rent housing.
Thank you very much. Pierre-Yves Madinier there, joining us from Fourth World France. Well, that's it from us here in the newsroom for now, but please do join us again. We'll be back in 20 minutes with more. Take care.